Okay, so hello, my beautiful people. Welcome to the first in the walk through the Major Arcana links with tarot and astrology. With me, I have Heather from astrologywithheather.com, who is an amazing astrologer. I really, really love her happy, quirky take on astrology, and also the depth of knowledge that she has is incredible. She works super, super hard, and she's brilliant. So please go and check her out. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that introduction. And I love your work as well. And you're definitely a hard worker. I'm so impressed with I signed up for your newsletter and you write things like every single day and you post all these videos and you work with all these clients. I don't know how you do this, but yeah, I love your work as well. So thank you for having me on your channel.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump straight into it. Obviously, please go and check out Heather's channel. You're going to see a wealth of knowledge and information there. And also, we will be posting a video each week on both of our channels. So if you want to follow the whole series, you're going to have to check it out. So today we start with the full card. And this is the first card of the tarot deck. It is the first card of the Major Arcana. And many people, when you talk about the links between tarot and astrology, this card actually has a very Uranian energy to it, a very Uranian feel. When you're talking about the full card, you're talking about the start of things, and very often it's kind of that, very changeable, transformative sort of energy that turns up or shows up in your life. Whenever I see this card in the tarot, if I'm reading for somebody, I always say to them, new things, new places, new people. The old way of doing things is completely over. The old understanding that you have is over. And also, in many ways, shapes, or forms, this is a rebirth of yourself in many different ways. And sometimes it can be a very shocking or interruptive moment that shows up in your life. So if you took in all of those symbolisms and sort of things that I mentioned there, Heather, what would you say when it came to like that Uranian energy? Does that make sense with the astrology?
That makes a lot of sense with the astrology. So Uranus in astrology is the great awakener or the great liberator. So it it awakens you to new potentials, new possibilities, new opportunities. It's a very impulsive energy and a very disruptive energy. So when you have a Uranus transit in your chart, it usually indicates that you're going to have to do things in new, completely different, outside of the box ways that you've never even considered before, and that can be hugely uncomfortable. And you can also make a lot of mistakes along the way. And that's kind of where, it's almost like a Uranus Aries energy, or, a Uranus in Aries, or, Mars Uranus, some sort of combination of that, because it's like this new beginning, and it's really exciting, and you're kind of just jumping in haphazardly and you don't really know what to expect or what's coming up. And so when I was reading through your materials on the Fool, which are brilliant, by the way, I was thinking about that Uranus and Aries transit that a lot of us just had. So for 8 years, up until 2016, 2017, Uranus started to move into the sign of Taurus, we had Uranus in Aries. And so that was a time where people were jumping into all sorts of new things in whatever area of the chart Uranus was transiting. And so for some people, that could be that they had to change their life completely, and they were one person one day, and then all of a sudden something happened and they had to show up in a completely different way, to the point where other people maybe didn't even recognize who they were anymore, and they had a lot of discomfort with that. For other people, they might have had to change their career path to something completely outside of the box, and they might have made a lot of mistakes along the way, but in the end they feel liberated, they feel much more free, and they feel like they have more control, more sovereignty over, their experience or what their career path is now. And for me, I had Uranus transiting through my 6th house of health. And so almost at the exact same time that Uranus went into my 6th house of health, I also went into, if you know anything about zodiacal releasing, I know you study Hellenistic astrology. I went into the most difficult period, an 8-year period that happened to correspond exactly with that, releasing from my lot of fortune that impacted my health. And so between those two things, I got very sick. and I started to suffer from a chronic illness, and I could not get any help in the conventional way. And so I started to have to try some things that were highly unusual. And even though I was open to these things, some of the stuff that I did along the way over the course of this 8-year period of healing was super uncomfortable and very unusual and outside the box, even for me. Like, I was like, I don't know if I should be doing that. That's like completely wild, right? But in the end, it was like I'm completely liberated from my old way of thinking, and I have a complete package now where I know how to heal myself. I know how to take care of myself. I know how to help other people to heal from that experience. And so it really shook me out of my comfort zones, right? And I was like kind of bumbling along and just trying all these different things and not knowing what to expect. And sometimes the results were not good. Not good at all. And sometimes I got really profound changes that came from ways that I would never have expected. And so that to me is like that fool's journey, or that full energy in astrology, that Uranus energy.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. Thank you so much. I got a million questions from that. But no, it's great. This is really awesome. I love that you mentioned like the haphazard part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at the card, you can see this guy as this you can see that this guy is kind of, he's at he's at like the edge of a cliff, right? And it's got the small little white dog here that you have kind of, you know, barking in his ear. So the haphazard part, right? He's walking boldly. He's got his, you know, his staff thrown over his shoulder. He's really launching himself into life, right? He's really ready to walk the path. That haphazard sort of energy that you talk about, you know, he's looking bold to the sky and paying attention to the sun, but you know, you're just about to go over a cliff, buddy, pay attention. And that's what the little dog represents. It's that part of you, or the intuition that kind of whispers in your ear, okay, this is great and it's good to be present in life, but pay attention to your surroundings as well, right? It's good to launch into things, but it's also good to take the knowledge away from it, or to be aware of more than you can kind of see in front of you. I got a really interesting story. One of my initiations in the tarot, I remember taking a journey to the Seychelles, really beautiful place, but very, very rocky, hilly, lots of really steep hills. And one day I'd walked down away from the place that I was staying, and there was this dog in the street. And interestingly enough, I'd literally just been to the shop and I'd slung my bag over my shoulder, and I was walking along and there was like this little white dog that was sort of next to me, and I was like, no way, like you couldn't make it up. It was a real sort of moment, because after it had happened, I was like, okay, I've literally just acted that whole that whole scene out. I love that you mentioned that the Aries and Uranus link there as well. So when you think about pure potential and that energy of driving things forward, you do think of Aries. And it's so true. When you think about Uranus in Aries, I think a lot of people were just kind of like, you know what? Stuff it. I'm just going to jump in. It's either going to work or it's going to go horribly, horribly wrong. And I really, really love that. I think the interesting thing about the Fool card as well, sometimes this can be a moment, sometimes it can be a conversation that you have with somebody, you know, like those moments where you meet somebody on a bus or a train, you have this awesome conversation with them, never see them again, but it gives you this completely different perspective on maybe a problem that you've had for a long time, or maybe, you know, like a chronic illness, or you know, jumping outside or getting that outside perspective or information just really sort of awakens something in you to say, maybe I can come at this from a different perspective, you know, maybe I can do this in a different way. And with the Fool card, I always say to people, new things, new places, new people. These are, you know, this is what the Fool is bringing into your life. It wants you to break out of that box. So I love that you mentioned that, and the part about the unconventional treatment plan and stuff. And that's exactly it. If the Fool is pure potential, especially with the zero, right? Zero is, it's the womb effectively. It's that place where all things are possible and no thing is kind of formed yet.
Mhm.
Does that link in with Uranus as well? I'm not.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first off, what you were saying before about that insight that comes in from like just a random conversation or from just a very unexpected place, that's Uranus. Like Uranus is the great awakener. It awakens you to potential. It gives you this like these downloads and flashes of insight that can come from like the most unexpected situations and people and places and all of that. So that's absolutely spot on. And that energy of like pure potential, that's Uranus, right? You have to do something in a completely different way. It shakes you out of your comfort zones and the old way of doing things, sometimes to the point where you have no choice but to do something new, especially if you don't embrace that change, right? And that's what the Uranus and Taurus energy right now, because Taurus is a fixed earth sign. This is a very different energy than Uranus in Aries. And this is what we've been starting to go through the past couple of years. This is where we're going to be wanting to hold on, especially to our physical comfort zones. This is where we're going to be having to go through a lot of changes where things are being very disrupted on a material level, especially when it comes to food and finance. And I talked about this several years ago. And, here we are, and this is what's going on, right? And so, with this situation, it's more like people really want to hold on to the way things are, but you have to look at the opportunity and the potential that's coming from this, because you can't go back to the way things were. It's not going to be the same. And so sometimes Uranus does that. It forces our hand and makes us make that leap.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So just a quick question about the Uranus in Taurus thing. Do you think we'll see a lot of people either changing where they live or how they live in their homes?
I think both. And it's going to be definitely out of necessity. One of the things that I talked about a few times is, first off, I really think there's going to be a mass migration, especially after this is all said and done, from the big cities, which are Uranian and Aquarian, and also Capricornian. So Capricorn rules skyscrapers and like finance and commerce and, corporations and all of that, right? And so that has an association with the city, but the Aquarius has an association with the city as well because of the technological revolution and how that drove people into cities when they lived in rural areas. So that's that Aquarian energy, that Uranian energy, that's a component of that. And so we have Uranus moving into the sign of Taurus, but we also have this Cancer Capricorn energy at play with the nodes and the eclipses right now.
Yes.
And one of the things I've been forecasting is sometime during this transitionary period, people are going to start wanting to leave the cities and move to smaller towns and smaller areas, and to live more simply and to grow, be near sources of food, and local economies, I think, are going to start to be built up. And there's going to be a more local supply chain because the food chain or the food supply is being disrupted. And I predicted that a few years ago, and that like the food supply seems like, it's being disrupted in the big cities, especially. I live in a small town. We have plenty of food and it's all grown nearby. Like we didn't run out of anything except for maybe a little bit of toilet paper because that comes from elsewhere, right? And so people are going to start noticing these things, and they're going to live a lot more differently. And their relationship with money and material possessions is going to change. People are going to need to be more thrifty and more unconventional in the way that they utilize their material possessions and resources. Like instead of going out and buying a new appliance, this actually happened to us. Our dishwasher broke for the third time in a year. It's 20 years old. And we went to go get a new dishwasher just before everything shut down. And there are no dishwashers within 3 hours of us that are new because the supply chain is disrupted. They're not taking shipments from overseas, and all of these appliances come from overseas. So my husband had to learn how to fix this dishwasher and get different parts from different locations. That's that Uranus and Taurus energy. People are going to have to think about new ways of solving these material problems that are not just throwing something away and getting something new or whatever they would normally be doing.
Yeah. Guys, I told you, she's brilliant. You see how much knowledge and information. No, but seriously, that's amazing. I love that you touched on the Uranian Aquarian link.
Yes.
Because very often when you see the Fool card, you could be looking at an Aquarius person. And a big part of that is because the Fool can sometimes represent the world. Like it's that one person, that the original thread in the tapestry, understanding your own uniqueness, but how you fit into the wider whole. And the beautiful thing about the Fool card is because he doesn't have a number per se, he can kind of slot in anywhere. It's that whole idea of the pure potential, or being able to be all things or no thing at any one time. Kind of like like the aces in the deck of cards.
Mhm.
I do, in some games they can be like a
Yeah.
1 or an 11.
And also the Joker is used in place of other cards too. So that can just be a placeholder for any card in a lot of games that you play. So that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you've just said. Actually, it's brilliant. So when it comes to the Fool and Uranus, and when it comes to Uranus as a planet, I once heard, or actually once read, about it being like the human planet, because
Mhm.
life travels in sort of 7-8 year cycles of the human body, and the same for Uranus. It spends 7 years, well, 7 to 8 years in a sign.
I mean, that makes sense. And Uranus has that association with humanity as a whole. It's a very humanitarian planet. And Aquarius is known as being a humanitarian sign that's concerned for the collective good, as opposed to more like, even though they're very individualistic. And this is something I wanted to ask you about with the Fool,
Yeah,
because Aquarius is a sign that's super enigmatic and it's very contradictory and it almost doesn't make sense unless you really think about it, because they're friendly and they love people, but they're very detached and they don't want to get close. They don't get emotionally tied in, unless they have other things going on in their chart. They're very
that's
cool,
very
calm,
true.
collected, friendly, but they're not going to be going there. At the same time, they're also very open-minded, and they see things from a completely different perspective. They have very weird ideas about things that sometimes it's hard for me to understand where they came to these conclusions from. However, they're very focused and almost like narrow-minded in their weird ideas to the point where they can get tunnel vision and they won't see these outside perspectives. So it's like it's very contradictory. Does that have any association with the energy of the Fool card in the tarot?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the idea that I mentioned of it being able to be all things and no things, that's
Oh
definitely
yeah.
a big part of it. So to go deeper into some of the symbolism, you see the staff that he's got over his back. It's larger and it's black. So the color black in the tarot represents kind of nescience, things that you're not necessarily aware of. That staff there is the magician's wand, but the fact that it's black means that there's almost like an ignorance or an innocence there of not sort of understanding how much power you've got sort of resting on your shoulders. But when you start to wield it or utilize it, it actually becomes a very powerful tool for creative things, for making things, or tapping into your own innate sort of brilliance. And the Fool has that kind of energy. So yeah, very Aquarian, because when you think about like that spark of an idea, and it's like, to them it's just an idea, but to the
Mm-hmm.
outside world or someone looking in, you're like, okay, but that's actually quite cool, and it has lots of different associations.
Yeah.
With the Fool as well, this again, so you see the little doggy, that
Yeah.
whole aspect of that thing whispering in your ear, and I kind of see that as like Uranus, like that sort of sudden flash of an idea, and it comes in, and you get it and you just can't seem to let it go.
Okay, yeah. I like that. And like that card too, if you want to hold that up real quick again. So that card there, well, I guess people can't see while I'm talking, but he's holding on to this like bag that's like attached to this stick that's behind him. And when you think about Aquarius, Aquarius is the water bearer, and it's often shown with this like rod with like a bucket or two of water, because it's that, again, that it's like holding a container of emotion, but it's keeping it at a distance. That's
Yeah.
that Aquarian energy. And then also you see the symbolism of the sun up in the corner. The sun is the opposing sign of Aquarius because it rules Leo. So there is like, and there's water in this card as well, which is that like, but he's not in the water, right? It's kind of like the separation from the water or the emotion. Is that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. And there's a few things there as well. So the part of, because obviously I'm an Aquarius sun, so
Yeah.
I totally understand that. And one of the things that I always said is the reason we don't do emotions is because we carry them on our backs. It's
Yes.
kind of like it's there and we know it's there, and we're like, it's kind of messy in there. So I'm not sure I want to go into, um, and also the idea that the Fool brings you something. right? So Aquarius is the water bearer. So he'll bring you water, but doesn't necessarily partake themselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Almost
No,
like
that makes a lot of sense.
a feeling of service, you know, I'm like, I'm here to deliver something to you, but not necessarily to utilize what it is that I'm bringing.
And that holding of the emotions, like definitely that's a very Aquarian thing, because I always say that they have sort of a voyeuristic approach to experiencing emotion. Like they see it, they understand it objectively, but they almost can observe their emotions and the emotions of other people like a third party. Like they're not involved in it, but they want to understand it and put it together. So that's a very Aquarian type of thing as well.
No, I love that. That's brilliant. And what you mentioned about the sun and the opposition there as well with Leo, absolutely. One of the things that I found is the link between Aquarius and Leo is a really strong one. Like a lot of my friends have been Leos throughout my life, and I just seem to get on with them. And I don't know whether it's because they're like, I like that zaniness, and I'm like, yeah, and they're really cool. They might not get me, but they're cool with me either way.
Yeah, absolutely. The opposing sign, I mean, there's something to be said about oppositions, because the opposing sign contains characteristics of the opposition, right? And so there's definitely a balance there when you have friends that are the opposing sign to your own. And if you think about it in terms of like rising signs too, if you're thinking about your first house, if you were like an Aquarius rising, your first house being dominated by Aquarius, your seventh house, which is your relationships, would be occupied by Leo, right? And ruled by the sun. And so you would get along with those people because they provide a balance to your energy and who you are, right? That's that sort of contrary energy that you need in order to have that balance and to have more of like a full spectrum of the experience, if that makes sense what I'm
Yeah,
trying
no,
to get at there. Yeah.
absolutely. I love that. And that's the thing as well. I think one of the big taglines for the Fool card could definitely be juxtaposition. You know,
Mm.
that idea of very different things coming together. And I like that about Uranus as well. I think we're starting to see that. And I don't know whether that's like an echo that kind of came through, even though Uranus has only sort of recently gone into Taurus. We're
Mhm.
seeing a lot of sort of very retro stuff coming into the new age, and they're kind of now getting this sort of mashup. Is that very sort of Uranus in Taurus energy?
Well, definitely Taurus is that tried and true energy, but I think that almost corresponds to that opposition between Aquarius and Leo. And also we just had Saturn starting to move into Aquarius. So I think we'll see more of that, because Leo is very nostalgic, very traditional. And Aquarius is the exact opposite of that. It's very like technological and looking toward the future and like all of these things. Whereas Leo is very much looking toward the past. Like you'll see a lot of people with strong Leo energy who and Leos don't like when I say this sometimes, but they'll like be reminiscing about the glory days and about, you know, times past and when things were better and these like better time periods. And so there's that balance there, right? Looking toward the future, but also integrating the traditional value systems or things that are more traditional, that actually have value from our past, and that you can integrate those two together. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that just because there's a lot more Aquarian energy coming in. We have Saturn there, and then we have Jupiter next year coming into Aquarius, and that's going to really amplify that energy, especially when we have the Great Conjunction at the end of this year in
Yeah,
2021.
December.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I love that. So taking it back to Uranus for a moment, because yeah, I mean, this idea of technology and stuff. So recently there's obviously this development. A lot of people are saying that Gemini is now sort of more ruling of the internet because it's something that we use sort of every day. Would you hold true to that, or would you say it's still more Uranian?
So I've seen that Uranus is more the internet and especially social media and our connections with people via the internet. Gemini is more emails and day-to-day communications that we have in any form, right? But I have seen that Gemini has a greater association with computers and the actual technology itself versus the connections that we're making via the internet. And so there is a distinction there. So a lot of energy in Gemini, like let's say you have Mars going through Gemini and your third house, which also has an association with computers, your computer might just explode, right? And then you might need a new computer. But the internet's still there. The internet is Aquarius. That doesn't take down the internet. Saturn moving into Aquarius could indicate slowing down, restrictions, limitations, and even a shutdown of the internet that could happen at some point in the next 2.5 years, because that's limitations and restrictions imposed on our ability to connect with everybody globally, because Aquarius is more all of humanity, right? Gemini is more interpersonal connection, sharing ideas. Aquarius is everyone connecting with everyone else. And so that's, I think, the distinction between the Gemini energy and the Aquarius energy. There's overlap, but it's not the same.
Love that. And that's where the Fool kind of represents the world as well. That's
Yeah.
where you can kind of see the distinction, so to speak, because the Fool, so imagine it was like a new soul, right? It's a new moment. When you're a new soul or a baby or a child, you meet everything with optimism and joy, and you'll just take it as it is. It's kind of like, that's new, it's great. That's new, it's great, because everything is new to you, right? And it's this idea. So interestingly enough, like we're talking about the future, the Fool card is something that comes into you. So when you see it in a reading,
Mm-hmm.
it's all, especially like if it falls with a court card, this is somebody that you don't know yet. It's somebody that you haven't met. It's somebody that is making their way to you. Interestingly enough, I've seen in spreads as well, I've read for people and I've said to them, you know, this person's on their way to you, and they're like, no, not happened. Sometimes it's like 2-3 years later and they'll say to you, yeah, you know, this person that you said was coming in, they come in. And sometimes it's, like we said, you know, that small conversation, and sometimes it's somebody or an event that can change your life in a really sort of big, yeah, in a really big sort of way. I love that as well, that this idea that it, you know, it can be small and it can be large. Is that very Uranian as well?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what Uranus is doing in your
Yeah.
chart. But it's a combination of things usually, because this is an 8-year transit. When you're talking about a Uranus transit in the chart, it can be, you know, minor little things that come up that turn into big things. There can be small unexpected events, big unexpected events. It's like a huge wide range of things, but in somebody's birth chart. So an example of that Uranus energy might be Uranus in the 7th house, or having Aquarius in the 7th house. People who have Uranus in the 7th house, they tend to have a lot of very unusual connections with people, and a lot of ups and downs in their relationships. And this can span from like small, like almost insignificant connections with people that are that they seem insignificant. It's just for a short period of time, like you're talking about before, like you meet someone on a bus, but it's like the most unusual, like groundbreaking experience, and it seems so simple, and then you never hear from them again. Or it could be a life-changing relationship where the entire relationship is new and exciting and fresh for your entire lifetime, and it's like you're always going in these new and exciting directions together, which is what you need when you have Uranus in the 7th house, by the way.
Yeah.
And so it can be all of that. It absolutely can.
Yeah. Fascinating. That's amazing. Yeah, really, really awesome. And I love the way that you can see the overlap as well. You know, this idea that the Fool can be sort of one person or many people. That whole sort of Aquarian tie, lovely as well, you know, and this whole, and for me it really is, it's that idea that I remain an individual, I can keep my own identity, but I fit in with everybody. And that's very much the Fool, right? So when we talk about it representing the world or the wider population, it's able to connect with all things because it's kind of like a mirror and a storehouse for all of the things that have already been, are now, and will kind of be.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
Oh,
And especially that future vision, because that's very Aquarian. Like when you think about the two, so in traditional astrology, there are two planets that are actually ruled by Saturn, which would be Aquarius, which doesn't make sense to a lot of people until you really get into it. And then you have that energy of Capricorn. And Capricorn is sort of following the rules and doing things based on tradition and regulations and things like that that are already put into place. It's your past karma that you're carrying forward, and you know all of these things that we'll talk about, I'm sure, with other tarot cards. And then Aquarius is like building toward some sort of like idealistic future. It's building to, it's looking toward, you know, what you're going to create and build moving forward. So there is that sort of looking toward the future component to Aquarius.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much so. I think the other thing with the Fool card as well, sometimes it can be an insight or a moment of like a seed that you plant. It's that thing that you kind of put away and you say, right, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on that and, you know, kind of let it go its own way, but also keep sort of doing what I can to mold it. But I want it to be what it's going to be. So really interesting that you mentioned that as well about Aquarius and kind of looking forward. In astrology, I kind of see, so one of the ideas that I really like is that each sign is kind of a, not an escape, but like a, not an opposition, what's the word, it's kind of like a response to the sign that came before it.
Yes,
So you get that
exactly.
sort of Capricornian, very fixed sort of, you know, we're going to do things by the rules and all of
Mhm.
that kind of energy. And then Aquarius is like, well, yeah, that doesn't work for me. So we're going to do it in kind of this way. It's a really interesting link actually when you talk about Saturn in Capricorn and Aquarius, because you can see that play out. You know, they say you get some Saturnian Aquarians and some Uranian Aquarians as well. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And that thing where you're kind of building off, I talk about this in my astrology course. It's like each sign corrects for the excesses of the previous sign, but it can also be seen that they kind of build off of one another. Because when you think about Capricorn, you're looking at what you already have from your past experience, how you're going to stabilize and create a good foundation from that to move forward from, and what you're going to let go of so it's not getting in your way, right? So you
mm,
get that foundation, it's really solid. And then Aquarius is what you're going to do from there, right? How are you going to take that into the future? What are you going to build after that point? And so, yeah, it's like, you know, Saturnian, very structured, Capricorn, very repressed, very responsible. And then Aquarius is like breaking free and being rebellious and doing all these new and exciting things. But you can also look at it like, you know, they're also helping one another. It's not just that they're breaking away from like this, you know, overly restrictive energy.
yeah, absolutely. I'd love that. Listen, I could talk to you forever about this stuff. I just want to say a massive, massive thank you for coming on, for agreeing to do this project with me. I have no doubt it's going to be an absolute blast. So, first of all, where can everybody find you?
They can find me on my YouTube channel, which is Astrology with Heather, or on my website, which is astrologywithheather.com. Pretty easy.
Awesome. And please do check her out. You have courses, several courses. I've actually taken a couple myself. I loved your locational astrology bundle. It was brilliant. It's a lot to kind of process because I'm more of a tarot nerd, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was brilliant. So thank you. So you offer courses. Do you offer one-to-one courses or group courses?
I have small group courses twice a year for like just introductory foundational astrology. I have a bunch of different webinars. I'm creating even more. I'm creating this electional guide for the summer that I'm really excited about. And I do one-on-one readings just I'm usually pretty booked up, so I take them in little bursts. So you have to catch me at the right time, unfortunately.
Oh, that's fine.
But if you check my website, it says when I'm going to open up again for readings at any point in time, so people can find me there too.
Awesome. So, guys, this has been the full card, links between astrology and the tarot. If you want to see all about the magician, you are going to have to go over to Heather's channel and check that out. That's the next one that we'll be doing. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Heather. For everybody out there, I would love to wish you an abundance of love, light, peace, prosperity, and abundance itself. Go be awesome. Heather, thank you so much. And I will see you soon for the next installment.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited.
Okay.